This three-part series launches the 2025 Blades of Valor Tour at Phoenix PD's Air Support Unit.
We are bigger than I envisioned us being. We are more relevant than I envisioned us being. But I'm very proud of the pilots that we have on both sides, because we don't have good pilots up here. We have the best pilots. We do. And we have the best cops. And we really built something cool. I love the culture, I think, more than I love the equipment.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and partnered with Vertical Valor Magazine. This inaugural three-part series of the Hangar Z Podcast was recorded on location at the Phoenix Police Department's Aviation Unit on Phoenix Deer Valley Airport as part of the 2025 Blades of Valor Road Tour. This year, our journey will take us to 4 agencies across 4 states, showcasing their exceptional work through print, video, and right here on the podcast. Events like this tour wouldn't be possible without incredible support. A special thank you to Airbus and Massif flight suits. Your support made the 2025 Blades of Valor Road Tour a reality. The Phoenix Police Department's Air Support Unit has a unique structure comprising of 2 distinctive details, fixed wing and rotorcraft. We were fortunate to sit down with a representative from each detail to get a comprehensive look at the entire operation. Today's guests are Glenn Elefritz, Chief Pilot for Fixed Wing Operations, and Scott Hopkins, Instructor Pilot for Rotorcraft. As you might guess from this being a 3-part series, you can expect a deep dive into a wide range of topics, including tactical flight officer selection and training, pilot development, the recent addition of a second Pilatus PC-12, and the challenges of recruitment and retention. You'll also hear about the fascinating career paths of both guests. Stay tuned as we explore the Phoenix Air Support Unit's guiding philosophy of culture over technology. For more about our visit to Phoenix PD Air Support, be sure to check out the Brent Bundy articles in the Vertical Valor Abscon edition, and then watch incredible videos by Lloyd Horgan on the Vertical Magazine YouTube channel. Thank you to our sponsors, Dallas Avionics, Night Flight Concepts, and Traca Systems USA.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
Give us a thumbnail, the quick rundown thumbnail before we get into your personal backgrounds of the city of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department. You know, size, square miles, stations. Give us a Reader's Digest version of that.
We're patrol-wise, we're about 1,000 patrol officers, 500 plus square miles. I think we're about 2,000 to 2,200 total sworn. And it's cool watching. I grew up around the department. My dad was a police officer, so it's cool to watch. You know, the department grow. And I know Scotty does, and I do. We have a lot of friends that are still out there that we help every day. Phoenix is home to both of us. It's still a great place to live, grow up, raise your kids, and that's where you get a lot of buy-in as a police officer of, hey, this is our city, you know, and let's go out and do this job. But it's I think, at least from an airborne law enforcement perspective, this city and department is doing a really good job of keeping up with the times, if not being at the forefront of technology and how we do business.
What's the population today? I know it'll change by tomorrow.
I think the last one's about 1.65 for Phoenix.
Yeah, 1.6, 1.7.
But I think we bounce back and forth. I think we're currently the 5th largest city in the United States. Yeah. Land-wise, or how spread out we are, we're one of the largest.
Yeah.
And we have a large metro area, so we have several smaller cities that, when I say smaller, they're bigger than some cities in some states, you know, some of their biggest cities. So we have a large influx population there. We have a lot of technology that's manufacturing that's come to Arizona, and that's building up. We currently have a couple manufacturing plants that are being built up for the computer industry.
Yeah, we were talking about that last
So
night.
they're talking about adding 6,000 jobs at one of them up here in the North Valley.
So there's going to be more growth.
Yeah,
there's Phoenix.
There's a lot of growth there. We also have a large Native American population here, so we have a lot of Native American nations that surround the Phoenix
Yeah,
area.
they butt right up to the cities.
Yeah.
So we're landlocked in some sides, but in other sides we're not. And
Right.
we're still growing. A lot of the places that were orchards or desert areas are now a part of the central part of the city compared to where it was even when I started. When I grew up here, there's a lot of things that changed. I constantly go flying. I'm like, when did they build that?
Yeah.
And when did that come in?
No, just pulled in the parking lot. Brent goes, that was dirt right there.
It was.
This huge structure
the
of
city
hangars
is
over here.
Pre-COVID, back to blowing up. The thing about all of the other cities around us is, we can talk to all of them. So we become, if work permitting, we can leave. If they need an air asset, whether it's helicopter or fixed, we're very good, and they've come accustomed to, let's patch radio channels and go help them out.
Yeah. That was my next question. Yeah. How much of that do you do?
We do a fair amount on the airplane side because we do a lot of task force stuff, and a task force will be, mixed in with the cities around it. So if they're doing a drug task force or an apprehension task force on any of the cities, all of the surrounding cities love the airplane side of things. Even if they've got like a Mesa or a Peoria that is got a helicopter unit, the airplane side can give them invaluable information.
Same thing for you, Scott, on the rotorcraft side?
Yeah, on the helicopter side, it's evolved as well. So when I first started up here, there was really only one other urban patrolling helicopter unit in the metro area, and that was Mesa PD.
Yeah,
and
doing
Mesa,
a long time.
Yeah, Mesa was affected by the same thing that everybody else gets affected with, budget, which affects flight hours and their ability to be up. They generally, when they were up, they would generally assist the East Valley agencies. For us, we didn't have a West Valley helicopter asset or air asset, so we usually took the west side. That didn't mean we didn't go out and help the other side on the east side. In fact, there was a lot of times we were relieving Mesa and they were coming to relieve us. And we all know bad guys don't, respect borders and boundaries.
Right.
So that happens quite a bit. Now with Peoria, their aviation units standing up, they're going to become a regional asset. The other side for us, our other mission on our rescue side, we are a regional asset. We support up to 5 other different fire departments in geographical areas. And even if that fire department, that's not part of their city where the rescue location is, if our rescue teams can go out there on the ground and assume the rescue component on the ground, they can use our air asset. We work only with our rescue technicians on the ground, so we have a seamless interaction. Our state and county aviation units here, they also have a rescue component, and they work a lot of the unincorporated areas. And they're like the state guys are state assets. They could take off from the Phoenix area and go up to Flagstaff and do a mission. The county guys, and Maricopa County is one of the largest, if not the largest county in the country. They're constantly going out and doing other missions. Their primary mission's not urban patrol. It's primarily search and rescue or directed missions. So we're starting to see more and more air units stand up in the Arizona geographical space. Yeah. And as their mission profiles expand, we're starting to see more and more help. So, but we always consider ourselves a regional asset. I don't care what patch is on your shoulder. I don't care what color your uniform is. We might have that rivalry going on, but when it comes time to do business, we're there for you. If we're up, we're going.
Right.
So
before we hit in the bios, we're well into this. This has been fantastic. Anything else you want to talk about before we go into backgrounds here?
No, I think we've nailed it. I'd love all the talking points we've touched on. This has been awesome.
Yeah, really good. Really good. So now it's time to talk about yourselves a little bit because it's important that we know who we're talking to in the background, how you got here, because it's fascinating. The how you got here stories that we have received from all the guests are just incredible, including Helen, who's a pilot here, Helen Balmer. She was a former guest. Her story was fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
It's just fascinating. So, both of you have really interesting stories too. So, Glenn, I'll go to you first. Give us your background and how you ended up in law enforcement, and how you ended up in aviation.
Aviation for me started, it's got to be 1980. I was probably 4 or 5 years old, 1986. I think it was the year Top Gun came out, and my dad did Top Gun and then took me to Miramar for an air show. And I remember sitting on his shoulders watching jets fly, and I was like, I want to be a pilot.
Yeah.
Whole youth growing up wanted to be a pilot. And I remember my dad was a Phoenix police officer at the time. He had kicked around aviation a couple times. Grandfather was a pilot in the Air Force, and and I just remember being young and wanting to impress my father, and had an uncle that was a police officer, alongside with my dad, and they were both of them were very well known, liked Phoenix police officers. So I always had that, but I never wanted to be a police officer. I always wanted to be a pilot. I just always was exploring avenues. Thought I wanted to go into the Air Force. I went to Arizona State. My academics weren't good enough to go into the Air Force. So 2005, I graduate from Arizona State, and I'm like, I've got a young family, young wife, young kid, and I'm like, I need a job. And the aviation thing is probably going to have to be on hold for now while I figure stuff out.
Right.
Well, my dad was still attached to the police department, although he had retired. He came back on as a civilian, and then my twin brother had just started the academy. And, I'm like, if he can do it, if he can do it, I'll get on and do it. So I 100%, one of those, things where I got into the family business, got on, commissioned out in 2006, and went, same thing. I was in the academy, and I was like, you better go get a South Zone precinct, and that was very well taught back then. If you want to further your career, go work in one of these 3 places. And I did. I ended up out in Maryville, out in West Phoenix, and I had a hell of a 4.5-5 year patrol career. Yeah. Luckily, other than getting severely injured or shot, everything else happened to me out there. Got into some very high stressed, environments, shootouts and CPR on kids and pursuits and bailouts and all of those things that I didn't know would have an impact on my airborne law enforcement career. But I wasn't out there for a very long time, but I feel like I got a lot of experience. I almost left about a year on, bitter that I wasn't a pilot. I almost bailed and went to an airline academy, to go be an airline pilot. And the housing crisis hit, and it shut down a good solid 10 years of aviation in the private sector. So I'm very glad I didn't go do that then. A few years on, I started riding. I can remember back then, Scott was a new guy up here, and it was cool. All of these guys that had careers had ended up here, and I was just like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And I didn't really go talk to the supervisors and the chief pilots, and then because I was more impressed with the officers that had just gotten up here. They're more recent as far as making that transition from the patrol side or investigative side into the building. So I tested a couple times to come up here, and then I came up here in early 2011 is when I came up here. And man, it was, and I can remember guys like Scott being like, don't come up here if you're not done putting your hands on people. And I wasn't, but I just loved aviation that much. I figured out my avenue, and got up here in 2011. And I can remember even helicopter guys that were mentoring me as I went through helicopter TFO, like, hey, this airplane thing's kind of starting to take off. We had just gotten into PC-12. What do you think about going over there and doing that? And that's what I wanted to do. I was wrestling with my conscience of, do I get out of the fast flying police work of the helicopter and go jump into my kind of flying? The helicopter is my kind of police work. The airplane stuff is my kind of flying. So it was hard because you can't have both. Yeah. You could, I'd still jump in the helicopter a couple times a month maybe and go be action junkie. But it was a very distinct crossroad of how your aviation career was going to go. So I went over to airplane side, and back then the PC-12 was the culmination of 3 other Cessnas. And, this isn't a knock on the people that were here when I got here and the instructors, but we were Cessna culture heavy. We trained everything like we were flying Cessnas, to include the PC-12. And it wasn't very standardized. We used to have a running joke on the airplane side. You'd pre-flight your aircraft and then pre-flight your CFI, and it was, they were all different, very good wealth of knowledge in their own world. But as a student, you guys have met and talked with Paul DeCoste. We were kind of coming through that same time of, it was very confusing for us of, how do you want me to fly? What do you want me to do? Are you going to be okay if I do it this way? Because I was taught a different way by this person. And Scott's over there shaking his head. He knows what I'm talking about because he did airplane stuff with those, with the CFIs there before he came over to the helicopter side. I think I was probably stepping up to 172, 182, we had a Cessna P210 before you ever even got into the PC-12. Back then, when we outsourced our flight training, the mission still took precedence over your airplane side flying. So you could be in class down there and you get a text message, hey, come back, we got to go chase a load vehicle, or we got to go take off a homicide suspect. And your airplane flight training was done for the day. It's very stressful. Yeah. You got to tell your instructor, hey, I know you had this all planned out. I got to go. And that's, I think we've all sat down as CFIs where, like, we can't put our students through that anymore. Right. This is what you go do now. Go do that. We'll take care of chasing bad guys when you come back. So I got into the PC-12. I was probably flying it by 2014. I started off in the 172, 182, old school, map book, binoculars, and I get airsick. I threw up for the first month I was up here in helicopters.
Wow. He's not the first.
He's not the, on the airplane side of my older partners, there's not a partner I didn't throw up on.
So everyone's like, fly with them.
The first month of helicopter TFO was the best diet I've ever been on. All my old academy clothes were starting to fit again. I was in my old uniform. I'm like, this is great. So by 2014, I was flying the PC-12, and we were flying it. Back then, we were doing a lot of dope mission stuff, a lot of burglaries. We had not yet transitioned into the apprehension heavy side that we are now, with very limited technology. It was a camera and a map and a radio. It's nice to have, but the ground guys, you still had to verbally walk them onto a target. I can remember doing, desert ops and stuff where you were trying to walk somebody up to a cactus in the middle of cactuses. I mean, it was very challenging. I'll say this about my career. I was bitter by about 2016 when there were no really more steps. I had become a CFI by then. I had been flying the PC-12. I was flying the PC-12 contract side, on the private side. So I was flying for private clients, but I always wanted to be an airline pilot. Yeah. And I was bitter that I was on the department not doing that. And hindsight being 2020, I was just in the wrong mindset. So in 2017, I was like, I'm leaving. I'm going to go be an airline pilot. I want to go do this. This is what I've always wanted to do. And my wife at the time, she was working for the department, and it was a hard conversation to have. We were my family was very Phoenix PD heavy, and I was going to step out from underneath that umbrella and black sheep it out of this unit and go be a guy who's going to go leave before the pension. Yeah. And I did. I left in the fall of 2017, and I went to SkyWest. I will say this. It was some of the best flying I've ever done, some of the best crewing and figuring out your aircraft that I've ever done. And I'm grateful I went and did it. And then I'm grateful it didn't work out because the stuff that we were able to bring back, I was only gone probably, 7 or 8 months, and tail between my legs, I had to come back. Yeah. And the department initially wanted to send me back out to patrol. And there were a lot of advocates all the way up to the police chief that were like, we've put so much time and money into this person. And the airplane chief pilot at the time was outgoing within a month or two. So I was very lucky all the way up to city HR. They were like, you're going to go back? You're going to get a new serial number? And you're not going to do this again. Yes, sir, ma'am. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to our sponsor, Traca Systems. With over 25 years delivering groundbreaking searchlights, stabilized DOIR cameras, mission mapping and downlinking solutions, Traca products, improve situational clarity and coordination with ground crews, increasing mission safety and effectiveness. Visit tracasystems.com. See clearly, act decisively.
I didn't cash out my pension. I left all of that in place, all my time. In fact, I was still a reserve while I was gone. So I'd go fly SkyWest CRJs, and then I'd come back on my days off and jump in the helicopter, jump in the airplane. Yeah, so I stayed on as a reserve. Came back by mid-2018. We had a chief pilot that was outgoing, a CFI that was stepping into chief pilot, but was only going to be here probably maximum a year. While I was over at SkyWest, I realized how much of that PC-12 we were not utilizing, either as a single pilot or crew resource manager. We had done so much in the I'm the PIC and you're not, even if you're a TFO who's a PIC, that we were very limited on, well, what happens if something happens? Mm-hmm. And you've got two pilots that know what to do with this aircraft sitting there. We actually had that before I left for SkyWest. We had a fuel emergency in the PC-12, and Paul DeCoste was flying. I was right seat. We're both two unit PICs. I can't remember if I'm CFI yet at the time or not. But we had a fuel emergency where we had to turn around coming back from San Diego. We're taking the dive team out there. And as we're coming back, unbeknownst to us, because we can't see our fuel gauges anymore, we're creating a fuel imbalance to the point where by the time we landed, the right wing was 600 pounds heavier than the left in the plane. Wow. And we didn't catch it until Paul is going through stuff, and it was very confusing in the cockpit. We're both trying to climb into quick reaction handbooks, emergency procedures, like we're both PICs, and nobody's flying the airplane. It's autopilot's on. And I'm watching the yoke just turn and turn and turn. So the airplane autopilot is counteracting the weight imbalance.
Right.
And I go to tell Paul, hey, we need to click the autopilot, and he clicks it off, and that airplane kind of snap rolls to the right. This is while we're trying to get back into Deer Valley. We declared emergency. We went into Luke Air Force Base. And we didn't even know. We're butting heads as Alpha Cop PICs, and we're stepping on each other. And I think that was a byproduct of we had not gone through, hey, this is what your job is, but what happens if you need another person with you? And while at SkyWest, that's all you learn. Yeah. Safety management, crew resource management, how to fly your aircraft, what your aircraft can present to you for information. And I remember sitting in SkyWest training being like, the PC-12 does this. I think the PC-12 does this better. And we're not doing this. And so when I came back, I brought so much literature from them, and I said, we're going to start implementing this right now. We are not going to be this divided cockpit because we were still doing two pilot transport missions, but you had one person who was going to do everything and one person that was going to run the radios. And you didn't have the check and balance of what the person next to you was doing. I remember we were not taking missions because of weather. I remember stuff being told like, you can't trust the weather radar on this airplane. Yeah, you can. It does it better than most jets I fly. Yeah. What are our personal minimums based off of what we're comfortable with? So in 2019, my chance came up. I became the chief pilot of the airplane side, and it was in dire straits. I was the only one flying the PC-12. Nothing but TFOs who had just come out of flight school behind me. There were 3 sitting waiting to be trained in that aircraft. And I was very fortunate to get to train them the same way to where, look, you're going to fly this aircraft, but remember, you've got a TFO back there who's also a PC-12 pilot. Or if you're going to do a 2-pilot transport mission, you've got another pilot. So I sat down and wrote policy on this is how we're going to perform these flights. And what we found out was we were so much more mission capable because we trained harder. Not that our pilots had more flight hours. They didn't. I was sticking guys in the PC-12 with 300 hours and being like, all right, we're going to go fly this thing to an airport you've never been to, down to minimums. Or, hey, we're going to go chase this bad guy and we got thunderstorms coming, but instead of ducking out 2 hours before you need to, turn your weather radar on and let's go look at this storm and interrogate it and figure out how much time in the air that we have. And if you can't get back to Deer Valley, what are your options? Yeah. Don't force yourself back into an airport. Yeah. Go fly somewhere else. All of these things that we really had not gotten into, that we discovered if we push the aircraft a little bit more and we build our proficiency a little bit more, we can stay in the fight a little bit longer.
Wow.
So it was very cool to build that program back up. It sounds almost selfish, but to the way that I wanted it. But I am forever grateful on the airline training, because I think that's the hardest training I've ever been through. The ATP check ride was no joke. I was like, the CFI ride's the worst. No way. The ATP check ride in an airline is just, there's a lot to it. Yeah, implemented that, and then very fortunate that we had a lieutenant come up here who wanted to get us out of piston flying. From the maintenance perspective, I knew our mechanics didn't want to keep having to work on those aircraft. We were using them less. Everybody on the ground wanted video. Everybody on the ground wanted downlink real time, and you can't do binoculars. Okay, he's turning. Yeah. It's just, we were hanging on to outdated aircraft, and we were slowing down our training progression because we were sticking pilots in airplanes that they weren't going to use after they got to the PC-12. So we sold them. We sold all 3 Cessnas, and we got out of the business of piston flying as a whole. The whole unit did. There was no more piston helicopters, no more piston airplanes. And then came time, I think we started in 2020, 2021, where we looked at doing a fleet replacement. And here's your shot, right? Like, you're going to build another PC-12, and you're going to get all the toys on it that you want. And we didn't want to miss. The PC-12 that Paul and I were flying then, we came into that, and whatever was on the aircraft was on the aircraft. But now we got this chance to future-proof this aircraft. What's out there? What do we want our mission to be? And I help other agencies set up their fixed wing programs where it's like, don't go shop for the airplane, and set your mission up. Set your mission up, and then find the aircraft that's going to best suit what you're looking for. I think a lot of people are like, well, we're just going to go buy a Diamond, and we're going to go buy a Cessna 206. Great aircraft, by the way. But if you envision bigger and you've got a department that can pay for it, go big, and then tell all your ground customers, those are all your buddies you patrolled with, hey, we're thinking about getting into this. Would you call us for that? Yeah, we'll call you. And I'm telling you, I think our unit has helped shape the way that we catch bad guys, either on the helicopter side or the airplane side, because we sat down a bunch of pilots who probably to this day, we can't ever dream going through the academy that we'd ever be sitting here doing this stuff. But here we are, and it's on us to sit down and let's see how big we can make this thing. Wow. So we put that second Pilatus together, and it came on the tail end of renewing the helicopter fleet. And we got the second Pilatus, and here we are. We are bigger than I envisioned us being. We are more relevant than I envisioned us being. But I'm very proud of the pilots that we have on both sides, because we don't have good pilots up here. We have the best pilots. We do. And we have the best cops. And we really built something cool. I love the culture, I think, more than I love the equipment. I really do. And it wasn't like this when Scott and I walked in here, where the culture wasn't that good. Mm-hmm. You had to be careful who you talk to, who you're friends with, and all of that stuff. And you're friends with that person, you can't be friends with me.
Was that because Brent was here?
Hey, I'm gonna say no comment.
Oh, here we go.
No comment. But
just kidding, Brent. We love you.
But Brent can absolutely attest to this, where and he still very much talks to all of us. The culture up here is, and probably Scott can say this because he's been here longer than I have, is better than we can remember it. Yeah. And I think that is what has helped us sit down as a team, 2 different houses, doing 2 different missions, but your goal's the same, right? Let's help those people on the ground to chase really bad people and put them behind bars and stuff. But that's it. It was I'll go be a cop. I got to figure out an avenue to aviation. I found it on the department. I got bitter and did the whole, well, the grass must be greener over here. Let me tell you about the airlines real quick and why I came back. I was a Phoenix native based out of Minneapolis in the middle of the winter. And I was gone 5-6 days a week, because travel time to come home. And I was home a day and a half before I'd have to turn back around and go do it again. And then I quickly realized the problem wasn't the unit or the department. It was like, all right, time to go look in a mirror, and I came back. But
is it true that you didn't have a jacket and you wore shorts in Minneapolis in the wintertime?
Yeah, it was. So I remember walking in the snow to go get supplies. I didn't know a city could shut down because of the snow. I'm a desert kid, and I'm walking to a gas station to go get food because I'm going to be in this hotel for the next 4 days while Minneapolis International is closed down. And I'm in jeans and I'm in Nike shoes that are dressed for Arizona.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is medic. Visit contest.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the buzzword.
And I got such bad frostbite, it took me 2 hours to feel my feet again in a hotel bathtub. And that was it. That was the weekend. I remember being on that trip being like, I'm going home.
Yeah.
I'm going to go home. And I wasn't at the airlines for a very long time, but I took a lot of knowledge back. And I even had friends on the SkyWest side sending me information like, hey, teach this, I think the whole unit benefited from that because it quickly turned around the culture when we started looking at it from the standpoint of you're a 2-person crew. And that the culture is huge to us because you're going to crew from the minute you get up here till the minute you walk out of here. Everything is a crew mindset. Yeah. It doesn't matter what job you're doing. It matters the job that you do, and so there's a difference, right? There's two people doing 2 different jobs, doing one job. Yeah. Right? That's safely deploying that aircraft to go chase bad guys. And you have to find that blend and you have to teach it with such a level of safety and consistency and standardization so that I go fly with Scotty tomorrow. It's going to be the same like flying with Dan. It's going to be the same flying with Aaron.
That's so important.
And I saw that at SkyWest. I had every time I took a trip, it was with a different captain. But damn, they flew the same way. Yeah. And I knew we were capable of that here. And I think we've done a pretty good job of bringing that to this building.
A few things that jump out. That's amazing. An incredible story. A few things that jump out. One is it was a blessing for both you and this unit that you left and came back. Yeah. That is extremely clear to me.
He's underselling it.
Oh, I'm
sure.
And
Paul DeCoste. So Paul DeCoste was a officer pilot up here. He left to go promote. He had no intention of coming back. We had nobody in the PC-12 pipeline.
It was dying.
There was a good chance that was going away forever. Yeah. Regardless of where it is now, that almost didn't survive. Glenn coming back and Paul DeCoste coming back in-house saved that fixed wing side of the unit. Wow. So the reason it's here today is because those guys came back.
Well, the thing that impacted me most about what you said is that about the technology and culture, that the culture means more to you than technology. That is a very impactful statement in law enforcement aviation and in police work in general as well. But that seems so important. The culture, it just shows you that you can have the best stuff. I mean, that fixed wing program, that Pilatus is amazing.
Yeah.
Ace 25 is amazing.
Yeah.
The technology on board all those things. But the culture means more to you.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
We are, and Scott will tell you this, and Scott told me this about the airplane side before I went over to it. It's very cliquish over there, and we are, you get around with your crew. On the helicopter side, you have your pilot that you fly with, but the morning crew really won't see the nighttime crew, and the crews are a little bit more spread out. Yeah. On the airplane side, we relatively work the same days and the same shifts, and we hang out. And we hang out, and we hang out, and we hang out. And it's when people who aren't from here come in here, you guys hang out a lot. Okay. But you're going to want that person sitting next to you when 300 feet from the ground, 250, 200, and you don't have the airport yet. And the airplane's telling you, hey, man, you're this low. And you have to crew at that moment. Are we landing or are we going missed? And you have other cops sitting behind you, kind of almost in amazement, like, man, we have cops that are doing this. Yeah, we do. The technology will always evolve, but the culture will too. But you have to have a good culture. You do, or you're going to make a mistake. You're going to have an accident, and then it won't matter how good a technology you have. We've all been around aviation long enough to know, man, when you make the critical mistake, there's no amount of technology that's going to beat gravity.
Yeah.
So
one other thing that you talked about, and we'll add to it. You not only have a twin, you have an identical twin.
I do.
Gary?
Yeah, Gary.
And we just met Gary briefly, but that's pretty unique. Identical twin on a police department together, and now in the same aviation unit. That's pretty cool.
So we actually patrolled together. We were messing with drunks and stuff.
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
Funny drunk story. So Gary brings in a DUI one night, and he's got him in an interview room, a small interview room. And Gary was a third shift guy. I was a second shift guy. So I'm already in street clothes getting ready to leave, but I'm looking through this window, and Gary's talking to the guy, but he's kind of being rough with him. Like he's just kind of being, bad cop, whatever. And he goes, "Hey, when I'm going to get my clipboard and I'm going to interview you, when I go to interview you, you're going to talk." And so I grab my brother's clipboard, and my brother walks out in full uniform, and I walk in with the clipboard in street clothes. And so then I start playing good cop.
Oh, that's good.
And I'm just like, "Hey, man, had a rough night. Let's just talk about this, all of this stuff." And more faces are starting to appear in the window because now everybody's watching us. And I was like, "Hey, man, are you thirsty? Can I go get you some water?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm thirsty." Well, then my brother played right into it. My brother went and got him a water.
Yeah.
And I walk out to go get him some water. My brother walks in with it. "Here's your damn water," and just starts yelling at him again. And this guy's just like, and he did it. He goes, "Man, I know I've had a lot to drink, but I swear you're changing the uniform." Oh yeah,
priceless.
It was great avoiding trouble there because our uniform said the same thing. But I loved working with my brother. He took a different career progression. He got into investigations. He was a robbery detective for a while. Went and worked at our international airport. But we're very blessed to have him because you get him in the room and he's very talented. But I think most of us will say he's one of the funniest damn cops on this department. And he helps keep it light up here.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Well,
great attitude. And when we did his TFO training, that was a fun time to be a trainer.
Oh, yeah.
So he was one of the good ones.
Yeah, you got brand new as a TFO and your brother's a chief pilot. It's like, okay, so, and he put a lot of pressure on himself. He did. But just absolutely from the testing process of when he came up to he's been a very good asset up here.
Yeah. And the only other thing I have to say to you, Glenn, is that you made me feel very old because I was at that air show that you were on your dad's shoulders, and I had about 4 years on the job. I went to Miramar every year.
Yeah.
I mean, Fighter Town. It was still Fighter Town back then.
Yeah.
And Top Gun had just come out, and it was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that place was hopping.
Yeah.
That was the greatest military air show in the world, probably. It's probably still in many ways is, but at that time period when you were being influenced by it, that was incredible.
My brother and I talk about it. We tell my dad about it. I don't think my dad realized then how much my brother and I were looking at him. And everyone having fathers, you always look at your father and stuff. And it, I never even thought about being a cop, but damn, I was proud when I got on, and a lot of people still knew my dad, and my dad always had a passion for aviation. There were always aviation books on his bookshelf and all of that. And he had, and hey, what you doing? I'm reading a book about airplanes and stuff. Yeah. And so, it's kind of cool to watch this blend of law enforcement and aviation that my dad fed both of us, and
very cool.
Yeah. It's been,
that's really great.
Yeah, it's been great.
Really, really cool story.
Yeah. Yep.
Glenn, that was amazing. But, I remember seeing you on your dad's shoulder. It's coming back to me now.
Yeah.
Scott, top that. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for setting me up for success on that one, guys.
Scott,
I appreciate that.
You've got a great background too, Scott. And so walk us through it.
Yeah. So before I start with that, you're talking about the ribbing we give each other. When he came back in, his serial number, which is our badge numbers, changed and it became higher. Well, we got a new water fountain in there that had the, it tell you how many bottles of water you saved.
Yeah.
And I think it was Glenn catches them one, or not Glenn, Brent said, "Hey, what's that at?" And it was some low number. He goes, "Hey, Glenn, the water fountain's got more seniority than you.
It was very big. I had a 4-digit serial number when I left. I came back and we had gone to 5 digits. So that's my nickname up here.
Yeah. So
that's a reminder. Don't do that again.
Wow. I can relate.
No, so for me, I started out a little bit differently, like where Glenn was really aviation focused as a young kid. For me, it was police work.
Yeah.
You know, I knew early on, and I was pretty set that I was going to be in law enforcement somehow. I had a family friend of ours when I grew up in Tempe, which is just outside of Phoenix, the home of ASU. He was a Tempe police officer, and I was over at his house as a real young kid. I think it was for like an Easter celebration or something, and he was a motor officer at the time, and he comes riding up onto his back porch, and he was a rather large, imposing guy. He was really tall, he looked like he should have played for the NFL. And when you're a kid, every adult looks like a giant, but this guy was even me. So I remember looking at him, and this is back when, you know, they were wearing the clamshell helmets and the mirrored sunglasses with the mirror on the inside. And, you know, he looked down at me and I'm like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like a lot of kids from my generation, you know, TV police shows were all over the place. And I'm like, that's awesome. And every officer I ever met, I was always like, man, these guys are just large and in charge. You know, there was an air about it. Mm-hmm. And when you saw what could be in law enforcement, now as a kid, you didn't see the backside of that. You didn't see everything else that went with it. But that really started me down the road. I knew all the way back in elementary school, I'm like, this is where I'm going.
Yep.
In high school, my family moved to Colorado Springs for my dad's job. He was a computer engineer. And where we moved to, the kids in my area actually went to a district high school in the Air Force Academy, which was a new thing for me. I hadn't been around the military. Even though we had 2 military bases here in Phoenix, they were far away, never heard of them. So outside of movies and stuff, I didn't know anything about the military. All of a sudden, I'm kind of thrust into the military culture. And Colorado Springs at the time had 5 military bases, to include NORAD, which is pretty unique. One of them was a divisional Army post, and 4 Air Force bases to include the Air Force Academy. And a lot of the kids I went to school with, their parents were Air Force instructors, and a lot of them came out of the aviation world. So as I got to know them, I got to hear about guys who flew B-52s, B-1 bombers, F-15s, F-16s, and it was, wow, this is pretty impressive stuff. You know, pilots always sound kind of cool, and, you know, I've flown on airplanes and stuff, but it just wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
And I went to an air show at Peterson Air Force Base, and with one of my buddies and his dad, who was a B-52 navigator, and he had enough rank to get him on any of those aircraft. And I remember climbing up inside a B-1, inside a B-52.
Nice.
They had a stealth plane out there, which was, at that time, was pretty unique. They weren't putting those out. And I was like, this is pretty impressive. And a lot of the kids that I was going to high school with, they were destined to go to the Air Force Academy. So a lot of people were talking about being a pilot. So I'm like, maybe this is a thing that could happen. You know, I want to be a cop, but being a pilot sounds pretty cool too. And I started realizing that I didn't have the academics to get into the service academies. That wasn't going to go. So then I'm looking, okay, well, what's the other path? The other path is ROTC, or Officer Candidate School. And because in the Air Force, you had to be a commissioned officer. A buddy of mine was looking at going into the Army, and he wanted to go work in the helicopter side. And he's like, hey, you know about military stuff now? Come with me and just check it out. I think he was trying to get me to sign up too, so he would get some extra rank. But
buddy program.
Yeah, the buddy program. Well, we called it something else. But we were talking with the recruiter, and the recruiter said, hey, you know, in the Army, warrant officers can fly helicopters. So, in fact, most of the helicopter pilots were warrant officers. And the way you get into the warrant officer program is you go enlisted, and then you go to the warrant officer candidate program. And then once you graduate that, you go to flight school. and you could fly Apaches. And at that time, I think the Army still had some Cobras, but they had Hueys. The Blackhawks were coming online. The Chinooks were out there. I mean, there was just a lot of Army aviation. And at the divisional post in Colorado Springs, they had aviation units. So we would see the helicopters flying by. And kind of like Top Gun, Firebirds was the movie for, for the
nice
the
attempt at
Apache.
the helicopter guys to try to have a Top Gun level movie.
We want to be relevant.
Nick Cage and Tommy and all them. But
wrong actor.
But it's all of a sudden it became, hey, maybe that's a pathway into aviation. Well, I started looking at it and saying, well, how do you actually get there? And they said, well, you got to enlist. You've got to go. You need to find a placeholder. They said, have you ever thought about being an MP? You said you wanted to be a cop. And my recruiter was an MP. And he goes, I already see you being skeptical about some of the stuff, so I'm not going to try and pull some of the recruiter stuff. He goes, come with me down to Fort Carson, meet some of the MPs that I know there. Just hang out with them, talk to them, get the real scoop. So I did. And I went down there, and they're like, yeah,
it's a good recruiter right there.
Yeah, so an unusual recruiter. I think he was actually on his way out. And that, having a conversation with my old man, my father and my grandfather were both Army non-commissioned officers. My grandfather was in World War II. My dad was the Vietnam era. And so there was a draw there. Although my dad wasn't pushing me that way. His thought was, have a plan. If you go to college, you're going to come out with a lot of debt, and you're not going to come out with a skill set that other people don't have. So, these guys that go to college, and I'm not knocking the college world, but when you go to college for a specific job and you come out, you have the same base skill set that everybody else that's competing for that job has. So he said, why don't you look at the military? If you do it right, you can save some money. They're going to give you free college, even if they say that, they'll give you all the way up to a doctorate if you want. The reality is you're probably not going to be in long enough to do that. But if you do it right, you'll come out with skills, money in your pocket, and you're going to be competitive. And I knew I needed a placeholder. At that time, you couldn't be a police officer, and anywhere I wanted to be a police officer until you turned 21. That was the minimum age. There were some agencies in the Southeast that you could be a police officer at 19, but they made you work the jails. So you really weren't going to be, and I had no want or desire to ever work in the jails. I barely, I loved arresting guys that needed to be arrested. Taking them to jail was like, can we get through this really quick, man? And our jails were, the jail in Maricopa County was well known among the bad guy population. They had nicknames for it. But regardless, I was like, maybe I can find a placeholder and be in an MP. And MPs in the Army have a kind of a multifold job description. So you have a combat MP job, and you have almost akin to a civilian law enforcement side. And I went in, I graduated in 92, so I was post the first Gulf War. So I was in between the conflicts. In fact, the conflicts that were out when I was active in the Army were Somalia, and right as I got out and transitioned into the National Guard, it was Bosnia-Herzegovina. Mm-hmm. So Gulf II, global war on terror, really hadn't come into play yet. So I got the benefit on the police side of being a MP that got to do a lot of the law enforcement side. When I graduated, I signed up. I went to Anniston, Alabama for my training at Fort McClellan, which is really no longer. It was a decommissioned base now. But that was a culture shock going to August in the South in Alabama, where you can see humidity in the air. I had heard about 100% humidity. I didn't know you could see it.
Yeah, there it is.
And you just realize you're going to sweat. Just get over it. Yeah. And when I graduated the MP school, I got assigned to Fort Stewart in southeast Georgia, so just south of Savannah. And that was a divisional post. So divisions in the Army are the largest sets underneath a corps. But, I mean, these are large bases. So when we weren't assigned to a combat brigade for their operations, we were doing law enforcement. So I got to do a wide variety of things, from patrol to investigations. I even got to do fugitive apprehension, going out and chasing down AWOL guys and, guys who'd committed crimes and then fled the military. Got to do that, which was fun. But I went on a deployment, 6-month deployment to Cuba during the boat crisis. When all the guys were coming over on boats to Miami, they shipped them all down to Guantanamo, and this is before they became a detention facility that it is now. It was a lot of family camps, a lot of just holding Cubans and Haitians. Had to keep them separate. Apparently they didn't get along, but we had to go out there and work these camps. Well, I got assigned to be a liaison between my unit and the Master at Arms for the Navy. And that's the Navy cops. So not the shore patrol, but the Master at Arms guys. And they had a harbor patrol. So I got put out on a boat. And I got to go out and do patrolling on the waterways surrounding Gitmo in a boat. Unfortunately, we did a lot of body recoveries when migrants would say, hey, I'm tired of waiting. And they would try and swim back to sovereign Cuba. So I got some experience there doing some other types of law enforcement.
When every second counts, trust Night Flight Concepts to keep you mission ready. With advanced night vision technology, FAA certified repair services, and expert training, we've got your six. Visit nightflightconcepts.com to learn more.
Well, when I came back, I went back to Fort Stewart. I actually never PCS'd or changed stations from Fort Stewart because I kept getting sent on deployments. When I came back, there was an opening to go to the specialty units. So that was canine investigations, traffic, and the game warden section. And I really wanted to be a canine officer, but that was something that you almost had to get that right out of basic to get. So I said, game warden wasn't even on my radar either. I said, let's just see. And I got in it, and I ended up becoming the non-commissioned officer in charge of that entire section before I left. And I liked it so much that I stopped thinking about warrant officer candidate school.
Wow.
I was
That's
like,
big.
It was such a change in what we did, and I had so much freedom. We had 280,000 acres of forest and ponds and swamps and 2 rivers, and we were pretty diverse. We got to do a lot of stuff. And at that time, it was an open post, so we had civilians coming in there. In fact, you could drive through the base and not even know you went through an Army base unless you saw a tank cross the road.
Yeah.
We had that too. We used to get a lot of calls. Guys, they would fire off those artillery cannons right next to the roads, and guys would swerve over and run off the road because they were scared. But I loved it. And I started looking. I'm like, okay, well, my hitch is coming up. So I had to do 5 years active. And I'm like, what now? So I started looking. I'm like, okay, law enforcement's back in the ring. Where am I going to go? Yeah. So I started testing I tested for Colorado Springs. I tested for a couple of agencies in Georgia around the Atlanta and Savannah area. I tested for some in the Carolinas, some local places. And I didn't really want to go work in those agencies. They were just experience. I knew I wanted to go somewhere big where I had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of active and diverse police work. But I was also looking at Florida and their it's changed names over the years, but it was basically their fish and game guys. They either got an airboat or they got a Boston whaler. They were either patrolling the swamps or they were patrolling the coast, dives, all the drug interdiction. I was like, yeah, that sounds like a cool gig. Yeah. Well, Florida was one of those places that you had to pay for your own academy at the time. So you had to go put yourself through the academy, and then your department would hire you and then train you. Old buddy of mine, I was on waiting lists for all these other departments that I tested for because that's how they did their hiring. A buddy of mine here in Phoenix goes, hey, man, Phoenix, they're constantly putting up billboards. They're doing ads on TV, heavy into recruiting. Why don't you come back to Phoenix? Well, I grew up in Tempe, and my buddy was now getting ready to retire out of the Tempe Police Department. And at the time, Tempe required a college degree, a completed college degree to even apply. And I'm like, I don't know about Phoenix. Well, I called my buddy and I said, thinking about maybe Phoenix. He goes, Scott, if I had the choice, Phoenix was my first choice. You're going to have so much movement and ability to do different things. It's going to be way better for you than if you come. He was like, don't get me wrong, I made a career out of Tempe, but if you want to be a young cop with your hair on fire, running around chasing bad guys and doing really cool stuff, go to Phoenix.
Yeah.
So another guy I worked with had just tested from it, and I submitted my application, came in and tested. So at the time, we were under, I think Clinton was still president. He had this plan where he's putting 300,000 officers on the streets, and the federal government was subsidizing the pay scale for these guys, or the payment for all these officers. And Phoenix was in a continual hiring process. And it was basically, as long as you pass all the tests, they're going to give you an academy date, and they're going to give you a job offer. Still got to get through all the background stuff, but you're going to have to, you do that. So when I went in, they did it down at the Civic Plaza. And, if you've ever, I know you guys have been, you guys just came from Verticon. I know I saw you at AppsCon. Yeah. Take those big areas where all those things are, open it up and just put table after table after table to take the written test.
That's amazing.
It wasn't a civil service test. It was actually, you had to get a packet and study for it.
Yeah.
But as soon as you passed, they gave you a thing, said, hey, here's the address to the academy. Now go down and do your physical fitness test. And then once you got through that, they gave you your background packet. And that's when the hiring sergeant was like, okay, so who's got questions? Guys are like, well, if I was in the military overseas and I visited a house of ill repute, and she's like, get out. So we started losing people there too. But I was like, okay. And they had a military fast track program because they knew it was hard to get out of get leave from the military and travel to do this. So they set up as much as they could right away for us. And I did all that. I actually came back out and I did my polygraph and I did my final background stuff, and I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. Well, meanwhile, my ETS day is coming up, and I go on terminal leave. So terminal leave's where you have all that unused leave time, but you're still active duty, right. But they're like, bye. So you out process. Well, I was driving from Southeast Georgia all the way to Phoenix, and I stopped off and I visited a friend in Abilene, Texas, a guy I grew up with, a guy who actually went into the aviation industry. He's a career aviation maintenance tech. He's worked for all the big airlines, hugely successful guy, but also shares my passion for aviation. And I get there and I'm like, hey man, I need to call and just tell him, hey, don't call my old number because I'm not going to be there. And I called up and I got the recruiter, which was just, I was blown away because those guys never call you back. You just wait for the letter one way or the other. And he goes, man, I've been trying to get a hold of you. And he asked me, he's like, hey, I've got this opportunity to work pre-hire. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's that? And he's like, yeah, we're just going to put you at one of our facilities. You'll do some menial tasks and, we'll pay you recruit pay. And I said, pre-hire? And he goes, yeah. He goes, well, it'll only be about a week. Are you okay with that? And I go, why just a week, He goes, well, because your academy date starts this day. And I'm like, wait, do you tell me I just got hired? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, of course I was thick at that. And, of course the whole state of Texas heard me. And it made that drive from Abilene, Texas across West Texas in July palatable. I had a destination to go to, and I knew I had to drop, because when I left Georgia, I was like, well, my buddy that called me, that got me to test for them, he's a manager at a local resort. He's going to get me a job, doing whatever, until I figure something out. And got hired on, went through the academy, graduated the academy, and they do a post academy. And the post academy is where, at the time, there was only 2 police academies in Arizona. They were regional. One was in Phoenix, one was in Tucson. In Phoenix, even though this was a Phoenix property, we had Department of Public Safety. We had smaller agencies that would send their recruits to us. So my class was like half Phoenix, like about 25 or 26 Phoenix officers. The rest of them were DPS and some smattering of smaller their officers. So you got a real generalized law enforcement academy experience. You didn't get a lot of Phoenix-specific training. So they brought you back for post-academy for a couple of weeks, and that's where you did all your Phoenix-specific stuff. Well, one of those things is they're like, hey, everybody up to the helipad. I'm like, what?
Is it a helipad?
We have a helipad out here at the academy. It's right next to the obstacle course, which we got to know really well, and it's at the base of something we call Cardiac Hill.
So you just hate that whole part of the academy. That's probably why you didn't recognize it was a helipad. I'm like,
Except for that helipad.
I still go out there, and I'm like, I can look up, that hill's still there, and you look at it, and you're like, oh, my God. I'm pretty sure I left some breakfast up there. But these guys landed in one of our air units, helicopters. At the time, it was the NOTARs, the 520Ns. And they come in, and these are some grizzled old pilots, kind of those warrant officer looking types. And, they get out and they give their briefing. And my roommate at the time was going through the academy with me. We both looked at each other and we're like, oh, yeah. And I started to think maybe there's a way to scratch both itches here.
Yeah.
And I went out, I got assigned to South Mountain Precinct, so that was one of the South Zones. My buddy got assigned to Central City, that was the other South Zone, along with Maryville. And we started just going out there and doing police work. And I had so much fun working South Mountain. There was a lot of difference. Back then, in the late 90s, crack was still king. Yeah. We had a lot of it. The gangs were going gangbuster. We had a lot of LA type gangs. We had the Crips, the Bloods. We had a lot of traditional Hispanic gangs here. So it was all just kicking off. Drive-bys every night. And if you were a young officer that wanted to do proactive police work, there was more than enough to go around. Yeah. And we have it here. I'm sure other departments call it different things, but we call it OV work or on-view work. And it's basically going out, you see a bad guy doing something, you make a traffic stop or you make a subject stop and you find the drugs or the guns, or, you go out and you do proactive. It's not responding to a call. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And the area I worked was the type, it was pretty close to downtown, but it was the type that people drove through really fast to get to the freeway. They did not want to stop. And I had a great time there. And I had an opportunity early on. One of my younger mentors, or older mentors, when I was a younger officer, was down there, and he was like, hey, have you thought about being a field training officer? And I'm like, man, I haven't been on long enough to do that. I don't have the street cred or the department cred to do that. And he's like, yeah, but you got a lot of experience out there, and we've watched you work. And there was a group of guys that were out there kind of directing that facet of that precinct. And they're like, we're looking for good guys to do this. Test for it. So I test for it, and I came out number one, and I got assigned to a field training squad. And I found out I actually like teaching this stuff too. For me as an instructor, the best part's the aha moment. That's great for me. Seeing these guys succeed, and it translates into here. Well, that mentor of mine was on his way here to the air unit. He had set up his thing, and he just retired out of here as the chief pilot for the helicopter section. Wow. So he was my contact. He was my rabbi, so to speak, for some of you East Coast agency guys. You know what that means. He was my rabbi into the unit, and he really shaped me and gave me the tools needed to say, hey, take your career in this path. You're not ready yet. Go get your experience, finish cooking as a police officer, get that experience level, become worldly within law enforcement within the Phoenix area. And I had another kind of itch I wanted to scratch. I really, and there's guys around here who give me crap about this all the time, but I was a motor officer before I came up there.
My gosh.
Pushing a bike.
Yeah.
Pushing a bike.
So, I wrote my own mom. They had all moved out of here, so there was no family here to write tickets to, but I would have.
But you would have. That's right.
But in the Phoenix area, motor officers work by themselves. You don't work in teams. So the chips thing
you didn't have Ponch with you?
Ponch wasn't there.
All right.
And I certainly wasn't Ponch, that's for sure. But I enjoyed it. I got to do a bunch of different stuff within that. But what it did was it gave me an opportunity to work the entire city.
Oh, yeah. That came back to benefit you many a night, didn't it?
And I always tell guys that come up to the unit that are sniffing around, they're like, well, I've only worked this area, or I've done this job. And I'm like, I can find something in every job in police work that will translate up here.
Every time.
You just need to know how to recognize that. I'm also going to show you some other things to do. So you don't have to go to SWAT. You don't have to go to these TAC units. You don't have to be a homicide detective. In fact, the patrol guys are probably our number one successful candidate. Glenn's an example of that.
Why would they be? You know?
Well, they should, and that's our number one customer.
Sure,
it is. That's who the backbone of law enforcement is. So I started sniffing around here, and I couldn't get in the first year for testing because of they were only taking a certain number of people, and they already had I think at the time it was 20 that they selected to go through the process. So they're like, yeah, I'm going to have to wait another year. So I didn't get to test the first year. But all of a sudden, I show up here one day kind of like, I'm going to do some ride-alongs. And the guy went to the academy with my old roommate who now is out on his own. He had gone the undercover detective route. He showed up the same day. And he's like, told you.
Yeah. You both remembered that day of the helipad.
Yeah, amazing. And he ended up, when I took the test, he tested with me. He didn't end up being able to come up on that first list, so he had to wait another year. But he came out number one on the next list because he now had somebody on the inside that could help shape his success as well. But I started off my TFO training. I went through the same program that we put guys through now. And back then we had a diverse helicopter fleet. We had gotten rid of the 520N NOTARs. That time MD was kind of going through some struggles, and I think we had 8 or 9 helicopters, and they were cannibalizing for parts. So the city had said, hey, we need to look at something different. We need to come up with a diverse fleet. So that way, if something goes wrong, we're still operational. So they went out there and they looked at what was out there, and they selected the AS350B3 and the A119 Koala. So we had both of those in-house when I came in. So I had to, as the TFO side, the equipment was pretty much the same. The concepts and what my role and responsibility was the same. For the pilots, now they had to, on top of having to fly airplanes too, they had to fly both sets of helicopters.
Because this was before the split with the two details.
Yep. So there were times when I would literally land. I did it with Brent multiple times. We would land from a helicopter patrol mission, immediately walk to the back hangar, push the Cessna out, and now I was doing the observer job in the Cessna. We'd land on that, go back, get in the helicopter, and go do another patrol flight. So we were doing it all at the time. And like Glenn was saying, we had some pilots that were proficient and qualified in 3 different helicopters, to include our rescue helicopter. And for those that don't know, the Augusta and the Airbus helicopters, the blades spin in different directions. Mm-hmm. So you could have control confusion. You got to really be in the aircraft when you're flying the aircraft. And they're obviously not standardized between the two of them. The 109 is an Augusta product, so that was at least you had that, but now it's a twin engine, so you had different things. But then you had to go get in the 172 or the 182.
That's a lot. It's a lot on your plate.
Brent did it with a Bambi bucket. Yeah. Forgot which helicopter he was in, and instead of opening the Bambi bucket, he did an external.
He might have pickled the Bambi bucket.
It was what? How old was that Bambi bucket? An hour old? It was brand new.
That's good material for the ride tomorrow.
I'm pretty sure there may either be a photo or video evidence. I'm not sure.
Ooh.
So it may be floating around out there, but yeah.
He said he immediatally knew.
He knew. When the helicopter gets light, you're like, oh, that's not water light.
No, that's not turbo.
Yep, that's not turbo.
All of a sudden, I just gained 150 feet in altitude.
But it is that whole, he made a hand movement thinking he was in one helicopter, and he was in the other.
Yep.
That just goes, because many units around the country and around the world even have this, where there's a mixed fleet, and that's the negative. Yeah. I mean, I understand why some had mixed fleets. We did for years. But when it comes to muscle memory, System 1 stuff, and emergencies. When
emergencies,
stress,
100%.
You had stress. Man, you can easily do things like that. Easily.
All right.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement. the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Military, Air Medical, Search and Rescue, and Special Missions Operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
When every second counts, trust Night Flight Concepts to keep you mission ready. With advanced night vision technology, FAA certified repair services, and expert training, we've got your six. Visit nightflightconcepts.com to learn more.
Thanks to our sponsor, Traca Systems. With over 25 years delivering groundbreaking searchlights, stabilized EOIR cameras, mission mapping, and downlinking solutions, Traca products improve situational clarity and coordination with ground crews, increasing mission safety and effectiveness. Visit tracasystems.com. See clearly, act decisively.
Thank you for joining us on the Hangar Z Podcast. We really enjoyed our time with everyone at Phoenix Air Support. They are a first-class operation with some unique approaches to accomplish the mission. Many thanks to Glenn and Scott for taking the time to join us. Make sure to check out the Vertical Valor ABSCON edition for articles and photos from our visit in Phoenix. You also will not want to miss the incredible video content on Vertical Magazine's YouTube channel. Brent Bundy and Lloyd Horgan are the best in the business, and they work tirelessly to get the perfect shots. Their work is just amazing. Don't miss that. Don't forget, there is much more to come in this tour from Texas DPS, Las Vegas Metro Police Department, and the San Diego Police Department. Thank you again to Airbus and Massif Flight Suits for the support in making the Blades of Valor Road Tour possible. Stay safe, and we'll catch you next time on the Hangar Z Podcast.